Hi, Jane. How are you today?
I am fine, Nancy. How are you?
I'm terrific. It is warm here in Minnesota. It is officially stinky, sticky, simmery summer.
We are anticipating Nebraska heat this week because it's supposed to get up into the hundreds, and it hasn't
Oh,
done.
yeah. So this is where it's,
We haven't even had
pet
much in the
warnings.
90s. So,
Yeah. Pet warnings and old people warnings. And yeah, so stay
so
cool, everybody. Well,
it's
to our audience today, Jane is one of our, I'll say, visiting pastors as Dr. Sue is on her 3-month sabbatical. So these are fun for me because I get to meet new people who are stepping in for Sue, and that always leads to a new conversation and a new perspective for me. So for our audience, Jane, why don't you introduce yourself just a bit? Tell you the folks who you are and how you came to be preaching here yesterday at First Press.
well, I grew up in Lincoln and then went to medical school. I'm a psychiatrist and was in private practice for a good many years in places other than Nebraska, which included working for the VA and also for the Air Force. And while I was in the Air Force, I went to seminary, got called to seminary, so completed my seminary studies and was actually ordained back at First Presbyterian Church, where I landed 2 or 3 years ago after retiring from the military. So
I love that. I mean, really, how did your calling come? While you were in the Air Force to explore the
it,
ministry.
yeah, it was kind of a gradual thing because it wasn't even on my radar, way back when. But I got more involved with a church, and they were having some issues, and sort of working through those issues with them actually brought me closer to God. And so, in a quest to learn more and be more, the trail led to seminary.
Mm.
And sometimes I'm asked the question, okay, why did you change professions? And my response is, I didn't. That the seminary ministry augments what I do in psychiatry, and my mental health training augments what I do in ministry. So
Mm.
it
I
blends.
can appreciate that. It's just, we're all on a journey and all of our passions and interests and job and career and whatnot. I think they're all interconnected and they're all meant to lead us back to who we really are, which is part of the divine, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you had told me way back when I'd be doing some of the things I've done, you gotta be crazy.
Hmm.
There's no
Hmm.
way I could have planned it. Yeah.
Yeah,
God is in it.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so Jane, you preached yesterday, and this was what I love about it is that you're talking about hope is faith in that which we cannot see. And so I want to dig into that a little bit because you talk about how hope and faith is how we're kind of connected to God. And we're all always connected with God. But what happens? Why do we lose hope or why do we lose faith? If we're always all connected, why do we lose it?
I think well, hope is kind of that intangible, kind of a thing, sort of a thing, and it's a feeling. But I think when we lose hope, it has more to do with losing our focus. And, Paul makes the point that hope in what you can see isn't really hope. Like, hope in the present, hope in what we have, hope that's sort of tangible, isn't really hope. But it's hope in that which we can't see, that which is embodied in our faith, embodied in our faith in God. That's where hope really is. So I think when we feel like we're losing hope, it has more to do with, on our part, losing our connection. I have to put my cat down. she's wanting to play more than I want to play. I think it has more to do with losing or moving away from our connection, losing focus with our connection with God. I don't know that the connection doesn't break because God's on the other end. God doesn't leave us, but we can lose our focus and sort of wander away from that connection. And then I think that's what's happening when we lose hope.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about hope is a feeling. What's that feeling like for you?
I think it has, part of it has to do with that feeling that I'm not alone in this, and that there's more to the picture than what I'm seeing. It's like, you know, we're seeing our lives, we're seeing our surroundings, the world, we're seeing it all from the first story. God's got the second story view. And if I step back and kind of look at it, you know, that way, there's some reassurance that, you know, I'm not alone in this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, the feeling may be, you know, one of, you know, hopelessness about a certain situation, but if I step back a little bit, say, okay, you know, this may not be going real well, but, you know, there's God's in it. There's more to the picture than what I'm able to see.
You know, it's interesting. Meg Weekly has a new book out, and it's titled "Who Will We Become?" And she actually talks about hope. She says, you know, hope isn't just sitting back, waiting for things to be different. Hope needs to be a little bit more of action, like step in,
Mm-hmm.
you know, help somebody who needs help, you know, change a dialogue, you know, when it's going negative or attacking somebody or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that, of how active is hope or inactive is hope?
Hope is an active thing, but I think it has a lot to do with perspective. I used the example yesterday in my sermon of that, you know, proverbial glass of water. You know, it's 8-ounce glass of water, but you've got 4 ounces of water in it. You know, is it half empty or is it half full? And it makes a difference. I had a jar of M&Ms, and I like M&Ms, and, you know, it was half. It was a 4-cup jar, and there were 2 cups of M&Ms there by actual measurement. But if I were to hand you this jar and say, here, have a half empty jar of M&Ms, you know, that's going to feel one way. But if I say, here, have this jar of M&Ms, have this half full jar of M&Ms, it's going to feel, you know, a different way. And that's when we have a positive attitude, that's when action takes place. Is that moving forward to something.
Yeah. As opposed to operating from fear.
Right.
Operate from love and abundance, right? Fear and scarcity to love and abundance. I am plenty to give. It's half by measure, but it's half full. So there's opportunities to give.
Well, and the other thing too, I think as human beings, we're wired to need to have something to work toward. You know, to do something there, but just the way we're wired, there needs to be something in it for us. It may not be a material thing, but something, you know, in it for us that's motivating us, giving us the energy to move forward. So if we're thinking in terms of our situation and into the future through a positive lens, there's energy there, you know, to move us forward. If it's a negative kind of a thing, then we lose that energy. Psalm 32 talks to that a little bit, that the psalmist is in dire straits. He's lamenting, and whether or not he's got some significant physical illness, or we don't know. But, you know, he's lamenting, and feeling lonely and how awful that is, and just like his bones are drying up. And then he shifts focus a little bit and says, but I know, Lord, that you're there, for me. And that's rejuvenating. And then he moves on and into a tone of praise and thanksgiving.
So couple then hope with faith. How do those things go together?
Hope is faith in the future, or faith in the future. Faith in God gives us hope for the future. Because that was one that, when Christ died on the cross, that's what it was all about. The gift of God for us in terms of eternal life, salvation, that hope, for the future. So that the faith in God's presence, faith in God's gift to us, nourishes that hope.
No matter what's going on.
No matter what's going on. The two.
So how do you also shared in your sermon that hope is a state of being? So how do we, when we lose hope or we're in the state of hopelessness, what are some ways people can, reconnect and create this state of being that you talk about, which is hope?
Prayer. We need to stay in communion with God. We need to stay in communication, with God. And prayer is how we do that. I think it's prayer, and through prayer being able to give control back to God. I know I have trouble with that. I like to be in control.
Yeah.
And it feels real out of control to say, hey, God, you've got it. And to really relinquish control. And I think that's something that evolves. I mean, none of us get it really right, but it evolves over time. But that awareness that when we feel like we're losing the connection, it has more to do with something that's going on inside of us. And the best way to deal with that is to get honest with God. Be able to trust God to take care of it.
I found myself being really uncomfortable about, last weekend. It probably started on Thursday. And then I just kind of spent the day on Saturday just kind of leaning into it and like, okay, Spirit, help me through this. Like, I think I'm sitting on a life lesson. I'm sitting on a belief that is no longer serving me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of went back to, some work I'd done before about how do you switch out your belief system, and it was really helpful because the details don't really matter, but my son has been on a roller coaster, kind of emotional, mental kind of healing crisis, if you will. And I'm his person, so I get the phone calls. I get the phone calls. And I will say, for the most part, I've been able to say, this is his journey. I don't know what his journey is. Right? He's a unique human being with his own biology and mental and fields and belief systems and whatnot. But I noticed that it was harder for me to stay in that sense of hope and faith when I wanted to be in control and telling him what to do and how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually brought me down. And I had to kind of, what's that song, Jesus Take the Wheel? Mm-hmm. I think it's a country western song. And like, but guide me on where I should show up and how I can love and support him. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not taking his phone calls. I'm just like, just help me be discerning. How do I support and love and not enable?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that's hope and faith. I don't know.
I mean, hope and faith are intertwined. It's hope, faith, love. It's all mixed in together.
I was listening to something, and yesterday when I was driving, and they said, when you are in compassionate action, you are actually expressing the divinity within you. Compassionate action towards yourself, to others, to the birds, to the bees, to the trees. And that's the doorway into you're connected to the divine within. And you talk about the doorway. So do you think compassion is a doorway to hope, love, faith?
What was that? Compassion?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I don't think you can break faith down into little cubes and say, it's this and this and this. It's a lot of everything that comes together. A lot of everything that comes together in our humanity. And if we keep our focus, when we keep our focus on God, then those pieces just kind of come together and
So how do you maintain your focus on God and your connection to God?
I have to be intentional about it. I think we all have to be intentional about it. There's so many distracting things out there that we don't even recognize. Just the busyness, the noise. I know some time ago my work situation was just really chaotic and stressful. And I just didn't, I knew I wasn't keeping my focus, where it needed to be. But, how do you do that? And so I just sort of experimented, with little things. I had a whiteboard in my office that I would see, just because where its location was, I would see it every time I went into my office, and I could see it from my desk. But it was situated in such a way that my patients didn't see it. So I would put little symbols or, a word or two that had meaning to me. If somebody else saw it, that'd be fine. They, it's just doodle on the on the whiteboard. But it was sort of a trigger, for me, to stay focused. And then one of the pastors that I was working with at the time gave me a pocket cross, a palm cross. And I put that in my uniform pocket. And I was always going into that pocket because whenever we signed on to the computer, we had to use our ID card. We had to physically have it. And we didn't wear it, but we had to have it. It was always in my pocket. I was going into my pocket like a gazillion times a day. And that cross was there, which was huge because it was, it was a reminder.
Just, nudge. Yeah, I'm not alone, right?
Yeah. So, it's little things. I think, we kind of have to, everybody's going to be different and sort of experiment.
A friend of mine has her on her phone. You know how you can have a picture on your phone? Hers is, life is always working out for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things I try to do is like, everything's working out perfectly and for me, for my greatest good. I meant to have this challenge. I meant to kind of fall off the hope and faith wagon a little bit to remember how good it feels like to stay on. When I get back on, maybe I stay on just a bit longer next time.
It's an evolving process. If I look at where I am now and what was important to me or how I stay focused, 3 or 4 years ago, it'd be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our faith is not a one and done, kind of a thing. We don't figure it out and then, that's it. We've got it. It doesn't work that way. Life keeps changing. We keep changing and growing.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's an ongoing process.
I love that. So when you were writing the sermon, like what What did you hope people really kind of get out of it? I think there's always an intention behind all your beautiful sermons. What were you just kind of hoping?
I think the intentionality of our relationship with God, we've got to be intentional about it. I just love the meditation by Howard Thurman, The Threads in My Hand. And he talks about how he's holding in his hand all these threads, and they're connected to different things or different people in his life. And things happen at the other end of the thread, and he feels it on his end. But the part, let me just, he starts it out was saying only one end of the threads, and Howard Thurman's a well-known, he's a theologian, educator, social justice advocate. He starts it out, he says, only one end of the threads I hold in my hand. The threads go many ways, linking my life with other lives. And then he talks about those different threads and who's on or what is on the other end. And then he closes with these lines. He says, one thread is a strange thread. It is my steadying thread. When I am lost, I pull it hard and find my way. When I am saddened, I tighten my grip, and gladness glides along its quivering path. When the waste places of my spirit appear in arid confusion, the thread becomes a channel of newness of life. One thread is a strange thread. It is my steadying thread. God's hand holds the other end. And I think that just paints a beautiful picture that God is there. God is on the other end. Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, on the other end, regardless of what's going on and how tangled, that thread is. So I think on our part, we need to be intentional. We need to allow ourselves to trust. We need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and when we can vulnerable with God, and when we can do that, then the hope comes along that thread. It's connected. We're not in it alone. We're connected. And we don't know what's on the other end of that thread or what's along the way. But we've got faith that God's on the other end. There's hope. It's a positive energy.
Thank you for sharing that, Jane, so beautifully. Our time has come to an end. How quickly 30-minute passes. So thank you, Jane, for being part of our community here at First Pres. For those of you listening, you're always welcome online or in person, and please send us questions. I'm not the only one with questions, and it's fun to explore kind of what's behind the sermon message sometimes. So with that, we hope everyone takes really good care of themselves. Stay cool where it's hot. I hope your glass of water is always half full.
Well, half full. It makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us at First Presbyterian Church, where faith is nurtured, curiosity encouraged, diversity welcomed, and all are loved. Find out more about us at fpclincoln.org.